Welcome to the Dropout Multimillionaire Podcast, hosted by best-selling author and serial entrepreneur Brian Will. Here we go.
Welcome back to this episode of the Dropout Multimillionaire Podcast, where we talk about entrepreneurship, building, growing, and eventually exiting businesses. I'm your host, Brian Will, and today is going to be a good one. Today we're talking to the real Jason Duncan. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Jason before we get started here, because much like me, his background is all over the place. Jason spent 13 years in pastoral ministry. And by the way, my son is finishing his master's in divinity right now. So you guys are on that same track. He spent 4 years as a school teacher before he became an accidental entrepreneur in 2010. And I'm going to ask him about that. Today, he owns multiple companies involved in various industries, including e-commerce, private lending, consulting services, motorcycles, power equipment, and real estate. Much like me, I have no idea how all that ties together, but we'll talk about that. Jason also has his own podcast called The Root of All Success. And he is passionate about coaching entrepreneurs who want to work less and make more money. As part of his coaching, he runs an exclusive mastermind called the Exeter Club, works with entrepreneurs to develop systems and processes to scale so they can live what he calls the exit life. He calls this exiting your business without exiting. I like that. Jason has a new book out called Exit Without Exiting. In fact, how to exit your business without selling it and begin living the exit lifestyle much sooner than you ever thought possible. And I got to tell you, there's so many more things I could have said about Jason, but we'd honestly run out of airtime before I got through all of them. So we're just going to have to roll into this interview and see where we go. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Brian, it's good to be here, man. Thank you for having me on.
No worries, man. I love this. So you have done so much. I want to dig into your past just a little bit before we get into a lot of business questions that I have. So, and I said a minute ago, my son is finishing his master's in divinity. So you started out as a pastor. Tell me about that.
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to design cars for a living. And I can remember back as early as being, probably 4 or 5 years old, drawing cars. So I've been doing it my whole life. I remember sitting through most classes in high school, drawing cars and trucks.
Yep.
And I just enjoyed doing it. I was president of the National Art Honor Society in high school and was on track. And I think in my junior year, I got accepted to 2 really prestigious art schools, and I was heading to become an industrial designer, maybe to work for Ford or GM or Volkswagen or something like that. And but part of my life was I grew up in a home that we followed Jesus. We were always part of our church, and we always had all that. That was always part of who we are. And I went to church camp a lot as a kid. And the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, I was a counselor at camp that summer, and I had already been accepted as into those art schools. But that summer, like, everything changed, because there was a night that we were all the counselors had put the kids to bed. We're laying out on the floor, or on the ground rather, looking up at the stars, just doing what teenagers do, just hanging out, talking, laughing, joking.
Been there, done that.
And I remember feeling at that moment, and it was multiple moments, but I remember that feeling that this is the feeling I want to have. And I don't think being a car designer would ever give me that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I considered to be my so-called call into ministry. So I went home that summer from camp, and I was like, telling to mom and dad, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go to art school. And they were happy because they didn't want me to move. So I decided to enroll in a local private university called Lipscomb University here in Nashville, Tennessee, in a youth ministry program. And that's, I ended up getting a degree in ministry, and I spent really my entire senior year and the next 12 in some form of ministry, vocational ministry, getting paid for my services as a minister. So that's how I got into it. And that's pretty much the story.
It's interesting, and your ministry was Christian based, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah. My son is a Buddhist and getting his master's in divinity, which is interesting to me. And he wants to become a hospice counselor. So that's a rough one. I don't know how he's going to do that.
That is interesting. Well, I tell you that the Buddhist religion, if you call it that, and I think that they've got different definitions and ideas of what that might be. But I think my personal opinion is that Siddhartha Gautama, who was the original, I may be mispronouncing his name, the original Buddha. I think that if you read his story, from my perspective, I think he was looking for Jesus. I think that's the way it happened.
Interesting.
And I think he predated him by I think 600 years, I think what the date was.
Yeah.
So he didn't see the culmination. And I think, like Jesus, I think he would have thought, why are people creating a religion after the things I taught? I think Jesus would say the same thing. Why are you doing this? So I digress, but good on your son. That's great.
So then you went into teaching. How'd you make that switch?
Well, I got sick of ministry.
Okay.
I got to me, in my experience, is that the westernized church had become too much like a business and a machine. And I was behind the curtain, and I saw how the sausage was made, so to speak. I saw all this stuff going on. I was like, this can't be what Jesus was talking about. This can't be the reality of being a disciple, one of his students, one of his followers. And so I just said, where am I going to go that I can actually make a difference in this world?
Right.
And for me, I chose teaching. And because I have a gift of teaching, I really enjoyed the teaching part. So I went back to school, got a master's in education, and started teaching school. And Brian, I fell in love with it. I thought for sure that I would be a teacher for the rest of my life, or at least in the education system. And 4 years later, the Great Recession comes along. Teaching positions are getting cut because of budgets. I was no tenure, last guy hired, number one teacher in the county.
Wow.
But they made the decision based on tenure, and I was left on the chopping block. My contract to get renewed, and so my teaching career got cut short just 4 years in.
And somehow you ended up, I think, in the electrical business, a lighting business.
Yeah. So I had to do something. And so I started a company, which is now known as Energy Lighting Services. That wasn't its original name, but started the company out of sheer desperation to do something to pay the bills. I knew how to sell because I had been a pretty good salesperson for many years in the insurance business while I was doing ministry, kind of bivocationally. And I thought, I know how to sell. LED lighting sounds like that's this new thing. I could probably sell it. So we started the company, and within a couple of years, I think our second year, did over $1 million in revenue, and just kept growing and growing and growing. And
you're a brand new entrepreneur. You had no idea what you were doing basically as an entrepreneur. You just got in there and started doing it.
I didn't even know how to spell entrepreneur. I didn't know what one was. I didn't understand it. I just knew that, okay, I can own my own business, and really I own my own job. Like that's what happened. But I was blissfully unaware of what was going on. And I was making good money, hell of a lot more than I made as a minister or as a teacher. But I didn't realize I was trapped until much later, as I got around people like you and people, in circles of very successful entrepreneurs. I was like, wait a minute, like all I am is a job owner. What is this about this being able to go where you want, when you want, do what you want? What is that about? And that's when my life started to change once again.
Yeah, I call that the difference between self-employed and being a business owner, which is a little ripoff of Robert Kiyosaki, but I think a lot of things we do in life, if you read my book, it's a combination of 100 different books I've read that we kind of string together in a different way. But so anyway, at some point you decided you didn't want to be trapped in this, I think you call it the prison of entrepreneurship or the prison of business ownership. And then what did you do to figure out how to get out of it?
So in 2010, we started the company. In 2011, like the school year going into the 2011 school year was the year I wasn't going to teach anymore. So I had to make a decision pretty fast. So I made the decision to start the company, or to like go full into the company. And I didn't even know what a business coach was. Like, honestly, I know I was joking about what an entrepreneur, I really didn't know how to spell entrepreneur. It took me a long time to figure out how to do that, and the E's and U's in the right places. But I didn't know what a business coach was. Never heard of one. I'd heard of life coaching, didn't really know about it. But once I was probably a year or two in, and I was like a sponge. I would go to all these business breakfast hosted by the Business Journal, or I would go to things at Lipscomb University where they have business breakfasts and people coming in and speaking. And so I started to pick up the lingo, and they were talking about business coaches and masterminds. And I didn't know what this stuff was. And I had a business partner that I had brought on as a partner to kind of help me, because I didn't know what I was doing. And he had been a successful businessman in his earlier years. And I thought, well, let's hire a business coach. Once I start, and he's like, nah, we're smart enough. We don't need one of those.
Yep. Classic
I
mistake.
didn't know any better. So I just kind of went with the flow. And so we were in business for 7 years before I hired a business coach. And really, I had acquiesced to him saying, no, we don't need one, all these years. And I think now, and I regret, like, golly, how many millions of dollars in personal income and revenue did I miss out?
Where would you be today?
Yeah. Where would I be? I'd be a lot different. But to answer your question, that led me to hiring a business coach in 2017, 2018 for the first time. And it was him who kind of pointed out the reality. You're trapped in this thing, right? Now, he didn't say that because he didn't have the language that maybe you use today, or that I use in my book, Exit Without Exiting, or the Exit Lifestyle. He didn't have that language, but he revealed to me through the questioning and the process of coaching me, like, this business isn't worth anything, Jason, because you're the center of it, and you really can't get out of it because it relies on you. And as I became aware of that, it's like, what do I do? How do I get out of it? And that's how I figured out how to do what I now refer to as Exit Without Exiting, which is the title of my book. And I didn't even call it that at first because I didn't know what it was. But once I pulled it off, it took me about 18, 20 months to pull it off. But when I pulled it off, I'm like, wow, that was actually pretty cool. And then other people start saying, how did you do that? And I started showing other people how to do it. And then it turned into a full-fledged coaching program, a full-fledged coaching business, a mastermind, and now a book.
And so do you still have the same coach?
Unfortunately, no. BJ passed away in 2020 during COVID. And it was very, very sad, but he was a great man.
My first mentor passed away about 3 weeks ago, and it was from COVID, weirdly enough. So since then you have built or bought or done other companies as well. What other companies do you have, and what all are you doing?
Well, I failed at most of them, but I tell you, one of the laws of the universe is that you've got to focus. He who chases two rabbits catches neither.
Right.
And so my problem was when I exited the daily operations of my business, I still own the company, but when I exited, like, I believed the truth, but told in a lie kind of way, that every millionaire has 7 sources of income. Now, you and I both know as millionaires that is in fact true. But what we aren't told is that they didn't go out and get 7 all at once.
Right.
That they locked one in like solid, and their daily needs and monthly needs, their family lifestyle was paid for. Then they started looking for other ways to create income. Right. Nobody told me that second part, and I failed miserably as a result. So I went out and started like 5 companies immediately. Like, I thought, oh, I like this, I can do this, I could do this. And I had the time and the energy to put into it. And most of them, I wouldn't say failures, but most of them, like, I had one colossal failure, one semi, the rest were like, eh. But I learned the truth of that he who chases 2 rabbits catches neither by action, not by somebody telling me that. And now I know that if you follow one course until you're successful, oddly enough, that's what focus stands for. Follow one course until successful. If you do that, you'll be much more successful. And I screwed up, but I started a hard money lending company. I have a real estate investing company. I started an e-commerce company. I started a YouTube channel. I started a couple of holding companies. I bought some property. Like, I was going everywhere, and I wasn't doing any of them wonderfully. The coaching business was the only thing that was going great. And had I focused only upon it, I'd be a lot different place right now.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to get into a little bit of a different vein here of questioning. Why do you think people start businesses? Why do they do it in the first place? What makes somebody get up one day and say, I'm going to start a business today? What do you, I have my theory on why they do it, but why do you think people start businesses?
I think the motivation is going to be different from person to person. That can be categories, probably 2 or 3 different categories. But I think one of the root reasons that people start them is to have freedom and be their own boss, to have control. I think that's probably it more than anything else. What do you think?
My theory is people start businesses for two reasons, and they're both selfish. They start a business because they think they're going to make a lot of money, because people have this idea that business owners make all this money, or they start it because they think they can create a lifestyle, right? And that lifestyle is better than working a 9-to-5 job. And what I find a lot of times is where they start this business because they think they're going to make a lot of money and create a lifestyle, they end up, because they don't join a coaching program, because they don't learn the things they need to learn, they end up working 100 hours a week for the same or less money than they were when they had a job. They get into what we call the burnout phase, right? Why do entrepreneurs burn out? Well, but they forgot what they got into business for. But that's the two reasons I think they do it. And I think they're both selfish reasons, and they can eventually lead to something more. But those are my two theories. How do you feel about those two?
I don't disagree. I think maybe there's that third reason I was maybe alluding to. And I think I fall in that third, although I think that you could probably persuade me to be one of the second, in the second reason you gave. I did it literally out of desperation. I needed money. Like I had no aspirations of becoming a millionaire. I'd never wanted to be that. I had a bad money story growing up. I thought money was bad, and rich people were probably shysters and they're corrupt. And like, I just thought, so when I started the business, I did it out of desperation, and I really didn't want to go into the corporate world. Although I would have, I just wasn't interested in going back, because I could have got a job as a salesperson somewhere making probably a base salary, 50, 60 grand, which is more than I made as a teacher, probably make another 50, 60 grand in commissions, 100 grand a year, probably would have been okay. But I didn't really want to do that. So I wasn't necessarily going for the money, and I was desperate. I had to do something. That's why I call it accidental entrepreneur. And then I knew that I could make money doing this. I didn't want to work for anybody else.
It's interesting as you were talking through that, I remember back when I started my first business, it was because I had been fired from like 4 jobs. And I was a terrible employee. And I really thought, well, my only real shot here is to do my own business. I had no education. I failed out of high school. I had no discernible job skills. So I did it because I really didn't have anything else to do. And anybody could mow grass and dig a hole and stick a bush in it. So, but in the back of my mind, I thought, well, I might make a lot of money doing this someday. But I really did it kind of because I didn't have anything else to do either. So that's interesting. So,
well, I think all our motivations come from similar places, whether it's the need to make money, the need to be recognized, the need to have some sense of accomplishment. I think if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think somewhere in all that is where all of us start, with the desire to own a business. There are some people that say, I want to start a business because I want to be a gazillionaire. But I actually think that number is probably smaller than most people would consider.
Interesting. So tell me, you've started the Exeter Club, right? Tell me about that.
Well, what's interesting about the Exeter Club is that when I started my coaching company, I had no idea, other than I knew people wanted to know how to pull off the exit without exiting like I did. So I started coaching people. They would just pay me a fee per month. I'd meet with them a couple times a month, one-on-one. That was all I was doing. It was like I was shooting from the hip. I was reacting to what their issues were. And I'm actually really good at it. I'm very good at that type of stuff. I've got very good an analyzer brain, and I'm very good at innovation. I'm a good strategic thinker. So I was able to help people quite a bit. And I think that goes back to my gifts of teaching and leadership from being a pastor for so many years and being a teacher. But that's all I was doing. And then I hired a coach, and the coach started helping me figure out, well, how do you consolidate this content into a single area? And we worked on building maybe this online university format, because I'm a teacher. And we floated that out there, and as a strategy, it didn't work at the time. I didn't have enough following. I didn't have nobody knew who I was. So nobody's going to pay me to get into my online university.
This is my next question.
So out of desperation, I started a group coaching program. Again, I do a lot of things out of desperation, I think, but I think that I started a group coaching program because I said, I've got some curriculum that I can write on the 4 reasons that if you like these 4 core principles, if you follow, you can exit without exiting. So I started this group coaching program and it started working. Well, when we got to the end of it, my coach was like, well, what are you going to sell them into next? What's the next offer? What's the next up level? What are you going to do next? And I was like, I don't know, maybe a mastermind. Like I'd never really been a part of one. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. And that's why I did it. So I started it and I decided to call it the Exeter Club, and it's designed for male entrepreneurs who are seeking that next level in their life as business owners, whether it's they do want to sell. So I've got clients who've sold their businesses, for 8 figures and more. I have clients who are still doing $1 million, or less in revenue. And I got clients that are doing 8 figures and more in revenue. Like I've got clients that are kind of span the gamut, but they all have one thing in common, that running the business is not why they're on earth. Like there's some other reason, and maybe they're trapped in their business and can't figure out how to get out. And that's why they join, because that can help them kind of get untrapped or unstuck. The others are capped. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of business owners, male entrepreneurs that go, dude, I want this to be a $20 million company, $100 million company. I want to go public, but I've hit the ceiling and my ability to lead this thing. I don't have any more hours. I don't have the connections. I don't have the network. I don't know what to do next. We're doing good, but I want to go to the next level. So the Exeter Club kind of feeds and answers both of those people and offers them the accelerated version to get to that, because we're all working together. And it's really a real mastermind. There's a lot of these things that are called masterminds. They're just conferences,
right?
Just a group of people. This is truly a mastermind. We do intensive mastermind hot seat, sessions. We do retreats every year. We do workshops. We are thoroughly involved in one of those lives to help each other get to that next level.
I'm very curious. You've said men only. Why men only?
Well, so this is an interesting. I'm glad, Brian, you asked this question. So I started out offering it to both men and women who came through my coaching programs, and none of the women said yes, like none of them. And I hired a marketing company a couple of years ago, whenever it was, and whenever we were early, we're like 6 months into this thing, and I was explaining it to her. She was trying to help me figure out how to market, do the messaging, and she said, "So this really does seem like a boys' club, because you guys smoke cigars, you get together and you talk about drinking whiskey, and you go to this really nice club in Nashville that's mostly men." And I'm like, yeah, it really is. I mean, that's who I am. I relate well to men, and I've never had a one-on-one coaching client as a woman. So yeah, okay, we'll just make it for men. And that was it. Like, we made the decision. But I actually had a lady who just she found me online, went through my online training, did all that stuff. And at the end, she was like, she's a coach herself. And she's like, I want to join the Exeter Club. So she starts reading about it. She doesn't know it's men only. And she gets to that spot on the website that says there's only one spot that says men only. And it's not like I advertise it for men only. It's just one little spot.
Right.
And so I run into her at an event. This is a true story. I run into her at an event in California I'm speaking at, and she comes up to me. She says, "Hey, I just went through your online training, your webinar, blah, blah, blah. And I was so excited. I was ready to join your mastermind. And then you said it was for men only." And I was like, okay, well, tell me more. So now, to fast forward, now she and I are having a conversation about what it might look like to help her, because she's a coach. She's a very successful coach, to come in and help me with maybe a women's version of it. So,
right.
I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Interesting. And you've been doing this I have 2 parts of this question. You've been doing this for how long? How many years now?
So I started coaching like a coaching company.
The Exeter Club. Yeah.
January 2020. I pitched the Exeter Club in October of 21, and we had our first meeting in January 22.
How did you, and I'm asking this selfishly, how did you find those first clients though? Because I think what you're doing is awesome, but getting over that hill of getting the first few clients, how did you get them? Were you just that well known in everything else you were doing?
No, I would like to say that I was, but the reality is I went through my network of people that I knew, and whatever measly marketing program that I had to get people into my group coaching. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to the end of the group coaching, I would host the big dinner at the end at this club in Nashville I'm a member of, and I would pay for dinner. I'd invite everybody to come in. We'd have drinks and we'd have a great time. We'd talk about what we learned in our group coaching program. And then I would pitch, hey, the next step is to join the Exeter Club. That's how it started, and I had, after that first meeting, I think I had 4 people immediately sign up. And then by the end of the year, I think I had another 2 or 3 people sign up. So we started out of the gate with 6 or 7 guys, I think. And then now we're at 12. And my goal, I'd like to see it at 50. Brian, you should be one of my 50 this year. If we grow this thing to 50, what happens is that you hit that level, that momentum spot. Just like with anything else, you hit this critical mass. You could take it to the next level. So you think about, the fee to join, the investment to join, and what you get, it's significantly much more valuable than the fee you pay. But if I get that fee times 50, now our retreats look a whole lot different. The guest speaker, the level of speaker I can bring in to do stuff is a different caliber of person. And it just starts to take on this big personality that I think can be something that could take over North America. I'm not necessarily interested in doing this in Europe or other places, although I'm not against it. But I really think that this could be the premier mastermind experience for entrepreneurs here in the United States who want to go to the next level.
Very interesting. And we're going to talk about this after the show a little bit more. So as part of this training course, I read something about a 10-hour work week. Is that part of what you teach in the Exeter Club, is how to get your work week down to 10 hours?
Yeah. So there's kind of a universal law that governs us as founders. And so the way that universal law is called the law of the architect. We, as the architect of the business, as the ones who run the business, really are bound to only perform 3 main roles in the company. And that is to set the vision, communicate the vision, and build the asset. And anytime we break that law, the law of the architect, if we're not focused only on setting the vision, communicating the vision, building the asset, but we're involved in doing paperwork and doing sales and doing marketing if we do those things, we're breaking the law. And what happens when you break the law, you suffer the consequences. So in the early days of a startup, you have to do everything. You're the chief cook and bottle washer. You got to do it all. But that should be a temporary thing. You and I were talking pre-show, like you're one of the experts at building a company that doesn't require you. And that's what the architect should do, is set the vision, communicate the vision, build the asset, not involved in the daily operations. Now, so if you back that into just a metric, like what's our metric? How do we determine that we're not overdoing it? Really, 20 hours a week, 25 at the very most, is what you should be putting in terms of hours if you want a valuable business that is being built as an asset. That's it. If you're working more than that, you're breaking the law. Not, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But what I say, based on my experience, is that I think you can run a profitable company in 10 hours a week or less. Why? Because I do it. I've done it. Like when I stepped away from the business that I owned for 10 years, still own today, like I was doing 10 hours a week at first, and then it was 10 hours a quarter. And now, honestly, it's about 10 hours a year. I sign a few pieces of paper a year. I might go to a meeting here and there, but that it goes. And the profit, the revenue is still kind of not on autopilot, because there's a lot of people involved and there's a lot of employees that do it, but I don't have to be there. So I believe that could be an aspiration. I think it's a lofty aspiration for a lot of people. Like you're not just going to work 10 hours a week, because you're going to end up saying, hey, here's a better way for me to build this asset. Okay, now you're going to probably put in 20 or 30 hours a week on figuring out how to build that asset. So 10-hour Entrepreneur is a course. It's an online course that I have that you can take. It's a 10-week online video course, and it's hybrid, because it actually includes weekly live calls with me and a group of people. So that's what that is, the 10-hour Entrepreneur course. And I talk about it a lot in the book, because it reveals all of the 4 core principles that I teach and all of the tips and tactics that I teach on how to get down to 10 hours a week.
But here's my question. Can any business owner do it? And this gets to a question I have. Like I get this question all the time. Can anybody be an entrepreneur? And my answer is no, because I don't think anybody can be an entrepreneur. I think it takes a little bit of a personality that some people don't have. So in this case, I'm asking you, can anybody that is an entrepreneur running a business get down to that 10-hour work week?
Are they able to? Yes. Can they? No. And the reason they can't is because of what's between their ears.
Got it.
So it's all a mindset issue. So I've got, you might think, well, how would a lawyer do this? How would a CPA do this? How would a doctor do this? Well, I've had those people go through my program. I've got a lawyer and a CPA part of the Exeter Club right now. Like, how can you do this? So my CPA story real quick is, when he became my CPA, he wasn't a part of the Exeter Club, because frankly, it didn't exist. So when he became my CPA, I remember him calling me at 7:30 p.m. my time, and he lives on the East Coast, so he was in Eastern time, so I'm in Central time. So he calls me at 7:30 p.m. and I'm like, dude, why are you working? First of all, it's 7:30. You shouldn't be calling anybody. But it's 8:30 your time. And so he told me what he was calling about. And I said, you do know what I do for a living, right? And he kind of laughed and he goes, well, I do want to look into this. So he eventually joined my the 10-hour entrepreneur course. And then he eventually decided that the Exeter Club was something he needed. And so today, I think the last time I had a conversation with him about this specifically, he said he's he's a lot less than 20 hours a week in his current business. And he's went on to start a whole nother business around tax strategy. So that's happening now.
And he's actually built a business as opposed to continuing to be a solopreneur or an individual CPA. Okay.
Exactly. And it took a mindset shift for him because he'd been doing it for 20 years the old way. A lawyer, guy that's part of the Exeter Club, same thing. He was a single shingle. He was the guy doing everything, solopreneur, and very successful, mind you, very successful. Represents a lot of very famous people that you would know if I told you some of their names in the music business here in Nashville, but he was doing it all himself. And so he comes through the course and he goes, wait a minute, like you're telling me that if I invest in hiring another associate or two and an assistant, like I know it's going to cost me money, but just like any other investment, I'm going to get a return on that by getting more time and more billable hours. I'm like, yeah. So like the first time I ran into him after he hired his two associates, he was so happy. He was so excited. And I'm like, this is how it works. And so a bad part of that story is we had some really bad storms here last Friday in Nashville, and a tree like cut his house in half. Like,
wow,
really bad. Now, terrible. I'm not taking anything away from the tragedy that is, because he could have been killed if he'd have been in one room to the north. He'd be dead. But here's the thing: if he was still running his business the way he was running his business 2 years ago, not only would he have to deal with the fact that he's got to figure out what to do with a house that's been cut in half by a tree, but he also would be struggling to make revenue and taking care of clients. But because he has his associates, he's got the people put in place. It's not doesn't take away how bad this is for him, and it is very stressful. But it's not as bad as it would have been otherwise. And I think that's the beauty of the exit lifestyle, is if you build this system, you have the margin to handle the unexpected thing. Like something bad happens, you've got margin to go deal with it. But if you're running 100 miles an hour, 80 hours a week, like you don't have time to deal with the unexpected. And something bad happens, you don't have the ability to take care of it.
I use this example in one of my podcasts. We built the last restaurant, and our MEP architect, mechanical, electrical, plumbing architect, we're 25% of the way into the contract, and he lived out in Arkansas, and these tornadoes ripped through there, tore everything apart, lost power, no internet. And I'm sitting around waiting for this guy to send me these plans, and he didn't send them. And finally, after a week, he calls and says, my house has been destroyed. Can you give me some time? I said, I got a construction crew standing here building a restaurant. I don't have time. I got to hire somebody else. Same point. Self-employed, solopreneur. Something bad happens, he's out of business. I didn't have any choice. I couldn't wait. So I tell people all this all the time. You got to build a business if you want to have safety. And in fact, one of the things I found interesting, because I do the same thing. Let's say somebody that wants to do that, right? They want to join the Exeter Club. They want to have a business that doesn't require them to be there 40, 50 hours a week. You talked about working backwards. Talk a little bit about that.
So I think that you have to start with the end in mind. And I think there was a book, I don't remember who wrote it, but I think there's a book called Start with the End in Mind. It's not a novel concept, so it's been around for a while. But one of the things I work with my clients on is, in fact, that process of starting with the end in mind. So if you hire me as your coach, and we're going to work one-on-one, which I do some one-on-one coaching, one of the first things we're going to do is a whiteboard session on reverse engineering your life goals. So we're going to start with a big blank whiteboard, and on the top left, we're going to draw a box. And I actually talk about this and give instructions on how to do this in the book. We start at the top left, we write what your current lifestyle is, how much money you make, how many houses do you own, what kind of cars do you drive, how much money do you give away, how much time do you have? Like we just isolate that down. And then instead of just building, okay, what's step 2, what's step 3, we go all the way to the bottom right of that whiteboard and we draw another square. What's the end goal? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? How many houses do you want to own? How much money do you want to give away? How much money do you want to earn? What kind of cars do you want to drive? How much time do you want to have? So we dream big. We dream real big. And so now that is our starting spot. So what we do is we go back one step from that. Okay, so if you wanted to own 4 homes and you want to drive a McLaren. Okay, well, maybe the step before that is you own 3 homes and you're driving a Porsche. I don't know, whatever. Like
right. No, I got it.
What's the one step? Okay. Then we do another step before that and another step. And we keep stepping it back until the step from where you started until the next step actually is doable and conceivable. Now, okay, that is where you start. So now we can take off.
I call these little accomplishable goals. Yep. You said start from the back, work your way forward, put all the steps in place, and then you just hit little steps all the way till you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's the way our GPS systems work. Our GPS doesn't, like, if I put in, I want to go from my home to the local coffee shop. It doesn't say, okay, all right, turn right over your driveway, turn left at the industry. What it does, it goes, okay, where is the coffee shop? And then backtracks it to where you are and gives the most optimal route. So if GPS is working that way, then our lives should be designed that way too. And also GPS will know as you start going, because it knows where the end is.
Right.
If traffic starts to build up or if there's a closed road, it knows how to reroute on the fly, because you can't plan for that. Our ability to adapt to situations is much better than our ability to plan for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like our ability to adapt to something really is much better strength. We have better strength in that than our discipline to plan something. Mm-hmm. So we have to design our life the way we want, but be prepared to make adaptations to that.
All right, Jason. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm out there busting it. I'm doing good. I've watched your podcast. I've read your book, Exit Without Exiting. I want to live this Exeter lifestyle. What's the first thing I need to do?
Well, the first thing that I would say you have to do, it sounds like your mindset is in the right place. So that's always step one, but it sounds like you're there. So now what are you going to do? Well, I think that I am the most qualified person on earth to help you accelerate the desire that you have to be living the exit lifestyle. Not why? Because it's not theory. It's not something that I think will work. I've actually done it, and I've helped many other people do the same thing. So I would say you need to get involved in something I've got going, whether hire me as a business coach 101, join the Exeter Club mastermind, sign up for one of my online courses, but do something to go deeper, because the magic is in the action. It's not in the thought. It's not in the premise. It's not even in the reading of the book or listening to the podcast. The magic is in the action. And until you take action, nothing will change. So my business coach of mine said a long time ago, man, if you can accelerate your path to where you want to go simply by writing a check, always write the check. So at this point, it would be appropriate for you to invest in yourself. One of the questions I ask people when I first meet with them is, when's the last time you invested in yourself? And the answers I get most of the time are, well, I read books and I do this. Like, no, when's the last time you wrote a check that hurt a little bit, but you knew that it was good? It was a check that you should write. And they usually can't say, well, no. I had a coach a while ago. Okay, well, how much did that coach? Well, they tell me, and I'm like, well, that didn't hurt. Like, I know how much money you make. You just told me you wrote $1,000 check or a $10,000 check. That doesn't hurt. You got to write a check that hurts a little, because that will make you committed. Because if you pay attention. Right. And so I would say it's time to write a check, accelerate your path to the exit lifestyle.
And you've written this book, Exit Without Exiting. And is this kind of the initial blueprint that leads to talking to you about going to the next step? I mean, how in depth does your book get?
I think the book is pretty in depth. As a matter of fact, when I started to write the book, I made the decision in January 21 or 22 to write the book. And I wanted it done by my TED Talk. I had a TED Talk scheduled for the end of April. And I said, I want it done by then. And my publisher was like, yeah, we can get it done by then. Well, it just came out. It just came out last weekend. Yep. But I think one of the reasons it took longer to do is because I actually went back through the book and said, I want to include all of this stuff. I don't want to just I want to give it all away. Like, obviously you got to buy the book, but right. I want to give it away. I want you to see these are the things you're going to do. Now, the benefit you'd get to working directly with me and the people in my club would be, oh, I see now how it happens. I see how you're doing it. But yeah, the book tells the 4 core principles that I teach. And it builds it around 3 characters I've talked about in the book, Edward, Cheryl, and James. And it tells the stories about how they implemented various pieces of these strategies and the successes or failures they had related to their actions.
Okay. And where can they get the book, by the way?
You can get the book on Amazon, or you can go straight to my website, therealjasonduncan.com/book, and you can get it there. I'm happy to announce that it is a #1 international bestseller. I'm excited about that. My team has worked really hard for that book launch, and we succeeded. And I got a great team behind me.
Yeah, I saw that actually on Amazon yesterday. All right, we're going to wrap this up here, but I want the best piece of business advice you've ever been given.
The best piece of business advice I've ever been given: cash flow is king, not cash.
Cash flow is king, not cash. Interesting. Tell me the difference.
Well, cash, everybody says cash is king. So having a bunch of cash sitting in the bank, people think that's king, but really in business, it's cash flow. The amount of money going in has to exceed the amount of money going out. And if you can pull that off consistently and predictably, it's always better than cash in the bank, because you can print money anytime you need it.
All right. That's awesome. Jason, I appreciate the podcast interview with me today. I appreciate you being on the show. And folks, that wraps it up for today. I appreciate everyone listening. Hope you come back for the next episode of the Dropout Multimillionaire. You can find us on all social media platforms at the Dropout MM, or you can go to our website at www.brianwillmedia.com.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dropout Multimillionaire. To learn more about how we can help you with your business, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, visit www.brianwillmedia.com or the Dropout MM on Instagram.